Hi, I'm Peter from Coffee Parts, and today we're looking at two high-end hand coffee grinders, the Weber Workshop's HG-1 and the Etzinger Etzman. On a high level, both are well-built, high-end conical hand coffee grinders. But they've approached things same, but different. In the HG-1, they're using an 83mm conical burr set sourced from the Mazda Rover, a very well-known large burr set. When on the Etzinger, they're using their in-house designed 32mm conical burr set, so a lot smaller, but developed in-house by them. And Etzinger really does know what they're doing when it comes to blades, as they are the blade manufacturer behind quite a lot of well-known grinders like the Baratza Seti range, the La Marzocco Swift Mini, the Orphan Espresso hand grinders, etc. They've also approached how these blades work very differently. The HG-1, it's a center blade that turns around, which is a common way for conical blades to work. When with the Etzman, they've inverted this and they called it the RRB, rotating ring burr. What effectively it means is the external of the conical blade that grinds or moves around. So effectively we've got large conical blades with the center blade moving, and you've got smaller conical blades with the external blade moving. Also, they've taken two different approaches when it comes to the handle. With the HG-1, we've got a vertical flywheel, and with the Etzman, you've got a horizontal lever. Now, same but different, but in some ways, the vertical helps keep the machine planted as you're pushing down, just like you do when you're cycling a bike, down as you grind. With the horizontal, you're probably going to grind a little bit more evenly in the way it distributes, but the grinder has a bit more of a difficulty staying planted. They've compensated for that by having suction feet on the bottom, but it still moves around depending on what bench you have. Another difference is the way it doses into the dosing chamber or portafilter. With the Etzman, it's the only grinder that grinds manually from hopper to portafilter, while with the HG-1, it's grinding from the insert here into a dosing cup or dosing funnel. The funnel is a little bit different in the sense that when you do put it on your portafilter, you can lift it out and the coffee falls straight in. Versus the traditional where you grind into the dosing cup, put your portafilter on the dosing cup and turn it around. So different approaches to blades, how the blades turn, how the flywheel, the handle works, and what they're dosing into. But both very well solidly built hand grinders, and different to the hand grinders that you generally think of, the Comandante, so to speak, literally grinders that you hold in your hand. So they do have a nice presence on the counter next to a coffee machine, especially if you are working with, say, manual espresso, like lever machines or nice pour over sets. There is something nice about having a solid manual hand grinder and really slowing down that moment and enjoying that coffee moment, so to speak. Something that, for me, I find really beautiful on the Sunday, almost like a Sunday drive. But let's look at these grinders individually and dive into the HG-1, then the Etzman, grind some coffee out, and just talk at the end how they compare. So with the HG-1, all Weber Workshop products are just beautiful. There's something really nice about original design that function well and that just amazingly well built, something that can last a lifetime, and in many ways products that inspire. With this unit, it's an original HG-1, actually from the launch edition, and since then there's also been a HG-2 released. With this HG-1, it's running an 83mm conical burr set sourced from the Mazda Rover and a manual hand grinder, grinding into a dosing cup. Under here, if you remove this with just some magnets held, you do have a distributor. So as you grind, it turns that distributor, and while the grind is coming here through the funnel, it is breaking down any clumps and distributing to get a more even grind. And that's falling into the dosing cup. Where the HG-2 has differed in minor things. On the HG-2, the handle here on the flywheel is foldable. So it folds in if you were to say store the HG-2. It also has a gear selector, so to speak, which runs a 1:1 ratio or 2:1 ratio on the flywheel. Think espresso versus filter coffee, or a lighter roast that's harder to grind through. They've also changed slightly the way in which you dial in the coffee. On this one, you just turn this left and right. On the newer ones, you lift it up and move it around the positions. Also, this one grinds through that funnel with the distributor and into the dosing cup. On the HG-2, they've effectively got rid of this and put the magnets directly on to the dosing cup here, which goes in there. And they've made this distributor just on one side, so it travels around the center pin. Effectively, you don't see the grind coming through, but it is distributed within your dosing cup. You then pull out your dosing cup, put it onto your portafilter, lift up, and there you have it. So very similar, yet different. But there's something amazing about the build of all Weber Workshop products. They've also started with a hand grinder and then built from there an electric grinder called the Key, also running the same burst set. With the Etzinger, they've made it very modular. For example, you can pull out the portafilter support just straight out and adjust the portafilter support high here just by squeezing in and moving up and down to adjust to whatever portafilter you have. And it's the only hand grinder that grinds directly from hopper to portafilter. Other features are you can actually pull out everything to clean very easily. To remove the hopper, you just open these two collars here and lift that hopper out. And to pull the grinding chamber out, you just bring it all the way to coarse. And once at coarse, it just drops down. And now you can clean the center blade and you can clean the whole inside super easily without any tools. Putting it back together is also very easy. One of the differences is the blades. So they run 32mm conical, built in-house by Etzinger. So Etzinger was started by Christian Etzinger, who's a Swiss-based aeronautical engineer. And he really looked at the different geometry of blades and how that affects coffee and what the best blade size were. So much so that he's built not only these blades, but a lot of this mechanism. And that's what's now used in companies like the Baratza Seti, the La Marzocco Swift Mini, the hand grinders by Flair and often Espresso. So although you may not realize it, you are using a lot of Etzinger gear on a lot of other grinders. Putting this back in is just about lining these shafts in, back in, inside, and then turning it around. Just lining them in, then pushing it up, and then turning it back in to where you were, and you don't lose your grind adjustment if you go back to the setting you were in. Obviously with the hopper, putting in that hopper there, locking it back in, and then it's just a matter of obviously putting your portafilter support back in, putting your portafilter in, loading in your coffee, and grinding your coffee. So different approaches in the fact that different blade sizes, different way that the grinds, internal blade versus external blade, grinding into a dosing cup versus grinding into a portafilter, and using a vertical flywheel versus using a horizontal flywheel. Let's load some coffee into both and see how they compare in a workflow sense. So I've just got two identical sets of 20 grams of coffee, and in the HG-1, you gotta load the coffee just in the top here. So you can't actually have a big dosing cup because it just doesn't fit in very well. While on the Etzman, it's simple. Just pour into the hopper and you're done. So let's start with the HG-1. We've got a support to hold here. We obviously already have it pre-dialed in. And this collar here will allow the coffee to come through and stop it from popcorning. Let's just grind out the 20 grams. Visually, it's very consistent and very fluffy, and it is quite nice that you can see the coffee fall from the funnel into the dosing cup or tumbler, whatever you want to call it. On the Etzman, it's going to be very similar, but we're going to be moving it around in a horizontal form. Now, you need a stable bench for these and you need to hold it down while you grind. Let's just see how these 20 grams grind. Let's start. And that was 20 grams of coffee. Also visually very consistent and very, very fluffy. So just bringing that down there. And for this one, got to move it out from the tumbler and into the portafilter. Both look very, very even, very consistent. There's no real way to actually know the difference without putting through a shifter or a shift, something like the curve tools or other tools of similar nature, and obviously putting it through an espresso machine. But they're the two different results, and I feel like I'm puffed out with both. That's why sometimes I prefer an electric grinder, but this in a different environment next to a manual machine is quite pleasurable. Geeking into grinders, everyone's got their own personal preferences on what they like. Different blades, conical versus flat, electric versus hand grinders, and how that affects coffee, the clarity in the cup, and everything else in between. But for me, there's one other factor, the factor of how it makes you feel when you're using the equipment. There's something special about both of these grinders, and to me in particular, there's something special about the HG-1. Maybe because I've owned it for a long time, or because I like the look. I don't know, but there's something about these machines that when paired up with another machine that's also slow and manual like a lever machine is quite magical. Much like a weekend car versus a daily driver. And then there's manual grinders of these grinders versus actual hand grinders, but they're very different use cases. These are more a grinder that you have on the counter and a different experience than something more portable, possibly more affordable. This is a different context. I'm curious to know which of these two grinders would you like to have on your bench, or if you don't have these, which manual hand grinder do you have? Let me know in the comments below, and like always, if this video has brought you value, if it's made you smile, please hit that like button, and like always, please subscribe. See you on the next video. Thank you again.